I think we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our panel on the role of photography and the pilgrimage experience. I first want to just say real quick thanks to Jamp and Caroline and Kamiko and the whole team. We were just talking right in our little green room about how much they've done for to build and create this Tadaima program, which has been going on all month long. Will be ending in just a few days. It's all archived. You can go check it out if you haven't been following along, but it's a feat of logistics and storytelling, and it's very inspiring. And so we're grateful to be a part of it with this panel. I'm Jeffrey Yamaguchi. I'm a writer, an author. I've worked in book publishing my whole career. And recently I joined because of JAMP, the Jerome Rohwer Pilgrimage Planning Committee, as a descendant of family members who were incarcerated at Rohwer. So I'm thrilled to be a part of that, thrilled to be a part of this program. And I'm really excited to be with my fellow panelists, Sandy Sugawara and Haruka Sakaguchi. And so I'll introduce them. Sandy is a journalist and photographer. She was an editor, reporter, and foreign correspondent in Tokyo for the Washington Post, and currently holds a senior management position in a global broadcasting organization. Before becoming a journalist, Sandy worked as a staff assistant to Norman Mineta when he was a member of Congress. Sandy is a Sansei. Her parents grew up on farms in California until they were imprisoned in the Amachi incarceration camp. And Sandy will be discussing and sharing the book she co-authored with Catiana Garcia-Kilroy, Show Me the Way to Go to Home. Catiana was going to be a part of this panel, but she's traveling. She's on the other side of the world. We knew this, and we were just kind of hopeful it might work out, but she would love to be here. She's not, due to the time difference and the travel, but Sandy will be able to share everything about this book, which I have a copy of and is an extraordinary accomplishment. So I'm really excited to hear what she's going to be sharing. And then Haruka, she is a Japanese documentary photographer based in New York City. She was born in Osaka, Japan, and immigrated to the US with her parents when she was 3 months old. Her work focuses on cultural identity and intergenerational trauma. And it's been published in so many high-profile magazines, publications like the New York Times and National Geographic. And she's going to be sharing a really amazing in-progress project that's going on right now, a documentary project. Very excited to hear about that as well. And so what we'll do is, the plan is that we're each going to give brief presentations. We're going to keep them real tight. And then we will open it up for, after each of us present, we'll just have a conversation. And I really want everyone to feel very comfortable putting questions and comments in the chat. And then once we're done with the presentations, just, unmuting and asking your question, and we'll just be having a wonderful conversation. So get started here with my presentation. My piece of this is to share a personal pilgrimage story where photography is a really big part of the experience because of my grandfather. My grandfather was a lifelong photographer as his career. He worked until his 80s, like all the way in a photo lab. And his career began when he was incarcerated at Rohwer, when he was about 20, 21 years old. And so I've always wanted to go and visit the site of Rohwer. I've always wanted to do it, but it wasn't until later life that in the summer of 2021 that my wife and I, on a road trip, were like, we're going to go to the site. We're going to do this. And so as we are planning our trip, to start doing research, how to get there, what happens when you're there, what to expect, things of that nature. I found a website for the museum that's based in McGee. And so that's what this screenshot is right here. It's a wonderful website. It's a wonderful museum. McGee is about 30 minutes from both Rohwer and Jerome. And, got all the information I needed from this site. And I sent the link to the museum site to family members. And my dad wrote me back and he said, hey, did you see the photo of Uncle Alan on that site? And I was so focused on the logistics of, planning the trip that I did not see that photo. So what you're looking at here is a screenshot of that website. And that is a photo of my Uncle Alan at the camp. And my grandfather took this photo. This is a known photo in our family. So it's just very cool to see that. And as I'm doing more research, I'm starting to realize that this photo is actually pretty widely used. It's part of the National Archives. And so right here, this is a screenshot of the Wikipedia page for the internment, the Japanese American internment. And so this photo is featured right here on that site. We all know a lot of people use that site to learn about things, history and that nature. So very wonderful to see that picture there. But one thing that did jump out to me as I was looking at noticing that the photo was there, that his name is misspelled, right? So it's Allan, but on the site it's Allen. It's just something that I noticed, and it's a user-generated site, but it's pretty good about having correct information. So it's just something I noticed, that the caption is just is incorrect. But this photo, I had an even bigger surprise. Was this is a picture of me at the site, but when we were actually there at the site and experiencing our pilgrimage, taking it all in, it's very moving to be there. And one of the things that happened is one of the information panels that have been put at the site, so people kind of can get some context and some understanding and learn some things, is that photograph. There is my Uncle Alan. That is the photo my grandfather took. And I'm beaming in this photo. I was just really, really thrilled to see it there. And it was a resonant moment, and to know that their place in this history is sort of documented in this way, and for all to see who visit the site. It was very moving. I did notice that there on these information panels, like so many, there are no names of the people in the photographs, and there's no photo credit, for the people who took the photographs. It's just something that, again, kind of struck me, and I made note of it. And when you actually go into the archives and you where this photograph is housed, the credit on this photo is actually Tom Parker. Tom Parker is a known person in the history. He was the head of the photo division for the WRA. And so it kind of makes sense that bureaucratically how he would have credit on photographs. But part of our family history is that this is a story that my cousin Brian, who's been wonderful about kind of keeping our family history together, and having stories that Grandma and Grandpa and others told him and sharing it with us. He said that in an offhand comment one time, my grandfather mentioned that there was a white government worker who had credit on a lot of the photos that he and his fellow Japanese American photographers had taken. So it was, again, just another thing that's kind of coming in through my experience and my pilgrimage and the research. Another thing that's just sort of kind of coming into my knowledge base and making me view how I'm viewing all of this in a new way. But this is just a photo of our family photo album, and so you can see the photo right here. This is a treasure, of course, for our family, and also in this photo album are the wedding photos, the reception photos. My grandparents were married 1 week before they left. They were married in the camp 1 week before they left. So all these photos are in that album, including the one of Uncle Alan. And also in this photo album is a photo that I had seen before, but it just hit me so much more after doing more of this research and being part of a pilgrimage experience and going to the site. This is my grandfather there in the middle of this photo, and you can see it says the Rohwer Photo Studio. That was where it was a business that they were running in the camp. My grandfather was like one of the people who ran that photo studio. He looks like a boss there. I so much love this photo, just seeing him with his arms crossed. And they're so young. These are just young men who are basically taking photos, running a business, learning a trade. It's just amazing. And it hits me, as I see and find more photos, that a lot of the photos that are out there that were taken to the camp that families have in their photo albums and on their walls and that are part of archives were because of this photo studio, the graduation photos in the yearbook, the wedding, the event photos. They did all kinds of things. There's one photo that's in the Roosevelt Library that my grandfather took, where he is credited, by the way. So it's just like the more you dig into this, the the more you start finding other things. And so this is the final photo that I'm sharing. This is a photo that my grandfather didn't take. But as you sort of do this research, you find other archives. And I found this photo of my grandfather in the UOP Special Collection Archives. And the caption is "Man with Camera and Woman," but he is tagged in the photo. So I was able to find it. Don't know yet who that woman is in that photo, but that's definitely my grandfather. You can see the camera he was working with. You can see how young he was. And the really cool thing, I mean, other than just like having this photo and being able to share it with our family, is I reached out to the special collections director and I just asking a few questions, and he put me in touch with the daughter of the person who took this photograph, Richard Yoshikawa. It's part of that collection. And we had a wonderful conversation just about our family histories and photography. And then I also let her know that I was on the planning committee for the pilgrimage. She is now on the committee. So photography and the photographs and this history has brought us together and open lines of communication. We'll meet in person, hopefully in June of next year during the pilgrimage. And my overall takeaways on all of this is that a photograph, led me into the desire to want to have that pilgrimage experience, to actually go to the site. And the site has now opened up new things where I want to know more and I want to connect with others and get more involved. That's how I learned about Sandy's book. That's how I discovered Haruka's project that she's going to be sharing, just kind of digging in, Googling things, meeting other people, connecting with JAMP, becoming a part of the pilgrimage community. And I will say that my own experience of just realizing how fragile the photographs are strongholds, but the nuance and the stories behind them is so fragile. There's so many things that we'll never know. And that is, something that's really resonant with me and just making me want to get more involved and preserve more and bring more awareness to things. A final note is just Juhu and I, my wife, going to the sites and taking our own photos of each other and the sites and then sharing them with family. It really did put top of mind for my extended family to also want to kind of reminded them that, yes, they too also want to go to the sites. And now one of my big to-do list items is lobbying to get them to all come to the pilgrimage so that we can be there together and experience together. And that'll chart all kinds of different pilgrimages, right? Bring some young people, bring my mom, my dad, my brother, my extended family. It should be really wonderful. So that is the role of photography for me in the pilgrimage experience. And I will turn it over to Haruka to share her project in progress.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your progress with us, Jeffrey. And I'm really excited to kind of hear about these very nuanced and subjective and, this kind of family-based approach to the story, because as we mentioned through my bio, I was born in Japan and I consider myself Shin Nikkei. So I think I have a broader approach and maybe a little bit more of a kind of maybe academic approach when it comes to this. So I just wanted to kind of frame that before kind of getting into this conversation. But I'd like to share my screen. Here we go. So Jeffrey, again, thank you for the introduction. My project is called Campu, an American Story. This project, it actually started with a rejection email. After much thought and deliberation, I will have to respectfully decline this interview. This was an email that I received from a prospective interviewee while I was on assignment working on a different story, photographing Asian American families in Atlanta in the aftermath of the Atlanta spa shootings in 2021. I don't know if you all remember this. It was an incident where a white man had opened fire on local Asian-owned spas, killing 8 people, 6 of whom were women of Asian descent. My assignment for this particular story was to photograph and interview these families that lived in the local Atlanta area and asking them to reflect on what belonging meant to them in the midst of this anti-Asian violence. So when the prospective interviewee withdrew his participation, it was the day before our interview date. I was pretty shocked. I was really looking forward to connecting with this person after having heard that he was a third generation Japanese American and a direct descendant of the camp. And as a Shinnikke, which is a term that we use for recent immigrants, those who have immigrated to the US after World War II, as a Shinnikke with no family ties to the camps, I knew that I had a lot to learn from this man. You know, I thought what a privilege it would be to hear from someone who had experienced this hateful violence, not only on an individual level, but also on an institutional level from our own government. I later learned that this interviewee, he had a bit of a complicated family history. During their incarceration, a part of his family was sent to Tule Lake Segregation Center because they answered no to the controversial questions on the loyalty questionnaire, which I think a lot of us are familiar with. This had created a rift in his family that persists to this day. I learned that the man ultimately withdrew from my interview request because he feared troubling some of his family members for appearing on a major media publication on a story about belonging in America, no less. So at this point in my life, I only knew the basic history of the camps. I knew that during World War II, Japanese Americans were displaced from their homes and forced to live in barracks and horse stalls. I would say that one of the only references I had to the camps was the Ansel Adams photograph of Manzanar I saw in a textbook in the fourth grade. As you can see, we have this picturesque shot of the Manzanar sites with a stunning backdrop of the Sierra Nevadas. And I remember seeing this image as a fourth grader and thinking, look at those mountains. No, it wasn't until 2 years ago when I finally saw the photo for what it was. Uh, Back then I didn't know that there were 10 former concentration camps, some of which were so large that they held up to 18,000 people, like the Tule Lake site in Northern California. I didn't know that the incarcerees were transferred to certain camps based on their perceived conduct, as you can see from this headline. In fact, I didn't even know about the loyalty questionnaire. And we're talking 2021, so this was 2 years ago. I didn't know about the loyalty questionnaire, that such an attempt was made by the US government to test the incarcerees' loyalty when they were held captive behind barbed wire. In the past, I've grappled with questions of, my own questions of identity and belonging. Here's a photo of me as a 4-year-old in New Jersey playing with my Barbie dolls. But as a Shinnikke who had the privilege of learning the Japanese language and being able to visit family members in Japan, I also had the luxury of kind of drifting between cultural identities. So whenever I felt like I didn't belong in America, I could turn to my lineage in Japan. Whenever I felt like I didn't belong in Japan, I could turn to my upbringing in America. And I would say I had this luxury of kind of perceiving cultural identity as this shapeless, kind of ambiguous, ever evolving thing. But learning about the loyalty questionnaire and how it affected the interviewee's family, it left me wondering, what if I didn't have that luxury? What if I were forced to choose a side in order to survive and protect my family? What if the choice I made not only impacted my life, but the lives of my children and grandchildren? And that was when I realized that I had much to learn from the Nikkei community about what it means to be an American. This was the impetus for my project, Campu, an American Story. It's an educational website about the forced removal and incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. Campu shares the stories of former incarcerees and their descendants who make pilgrimages to the sites where they or their ancestors were incarcerated. I'd like to share a trailer that I made featuring Gregory and Midori Sampson. They were the first family that had allowed me to join them on a private pilgrimage that they made to Tule Lake last summer.
I was raised that this is a period of my family's life that we want to forget. Our family is like, we never really talked about a lot of stuff, personal stuff. I never knew my parents' birthday, or I never knew anything about their history, you know. I didn't even know how I fit in the family dynamic. All of my siblings all have this tendency to have secrets. And I think that's a lot of what my mom learned, to repress a lot of ideas or attitudes because it's going to get you in trouble. When we named our daughter Midori, my mom had a fit, just went on for a couple months about how this was going to be nothing but trouble for us with her name being Japanese, and why would you do that to her? And so yeah, there's that feeling in there of that this could happen again.
So, over the past year, I have been attending pilgrimages of the 10 former WRA camps, and I've been asking pilgrimage attendees to reflect on their pilgrimage experience by writing a letter. The handwriting that you're seeing superimposed on each portrait. I've been asking survivors to write a letter to their child self when they were incarcerated, and I've been asking descendants to write a letter to the survivor and their family. And through this project, I hope to not only preserve firsthand accounts of the camps from aging survivors before they're lost forever, but I also hope to reveal newer perspectives on how wartime incarceration, it continues to affect Japanese American families today. I think my ultimate goal for this project is to reintroduce the story of Japanese American incarceration, not as a shameful blemish in American history, but also a uniquely American story of survival and redemption. The final project will be presented as an educational website, complete with camp profiles containing contemporary and archival photos of the 10 concentration camps, and family profiles where readers can learn more about each individual and listen to them actually reading out their letters in their own voice. So this would be an example. This would be a photo that I made of Tule Lake last summer, actually, when I had the chance to visit with Midori and Greg. And as you scroll down, you'll see the blueprint, the master plot plan by the War Relocation Authority. And yeah, some basic information about each camp, followed by a visual comparison. This, as you can imagine, was a bit of a challenge to photograph because I'm kind of going off of archival photos and making sure that it's framed correctly. So I'm sure anyone watching me photographing this must have thought I was insane. It's all the micro adjustments I was making, taking 2 steps here, 3 steps here. But yeah, I'm hoping that readers can get a sense of, to be able to compare what the site looked like then versus what remains of the site now. And I have been including photographs of the structures that remain today. So I think, Sandy, your photos of Tule Lake, and I mean, the title of your book, I can go on forever about how much I love your work, but I think you can allude to kind of the physical structures that stand today and how they're kept, are very different with each site. So Tule Lake, we were actually able to tour with a ranger who had shown us, obviously visible structures like this, like the remains of the mess hall. But this was at Camp Tule Lake, which would have been a drive, about a 5-minute drive away from the segregation center. So a lot of these sites, we had to kind of get a ranger or someone who was familiar with the area to lead us to these places. So you've probably been staring at this image for a while. I have Tule Lake and basic information about the date that it opened, the location, peak population of each site, followed by master plot plan of the War Relocation Authority, what they had, I guess, envisioned for the site, the barrack placement, and where the facilities would be. And then as you scroll down the site, you get a visual comparison of what the site looks like then versus what the site looks like now. This was where I was sharing a little bit about how funny I must have looked photographing, just trying to get the perfect angle. And you get an overview of the structures that are remaining at the site today. So this was the mess hall that I was referring to earlier. That's at Camp Tule Lake. It's a little bit of a drive away from the segregation center, the jail cell that you saw on the top of the page there. But this is the remains of a mess hall on the Tule Lake site today. And as you scroll down the site, you learn more about with Tule Lake. It's hard to speak about Tule Lake without talking about the jail within a jail, the segregation center and the military blockade there. So we were able to, myself and Gregory and Midori were able to go inside the jail cell, and inside one of these wings is. Actually, I think Sandy, I see smiling over there. This is the pencil scrawling on the wall. It's near one of the cots that you're seeing on the left photo here, where I would imagine there was a person who was incarcerated who was maybe sleeping on the metal cot that you're seeing here. Writing on the wall, "Show me the way to go to home." And seeing this, it moved me to tears because it was. I can imagine what is going through the mind of someone who is sleeping on these metal cots, who has been incarcerated and doesn't know when their incarceration is going to end, when they're going to be able to go back to where they came from. As you scroll down the page, there'll be a section dedicated to what makes each site historically significant. And it closes with the landmark status of each site, so readers have an idea of the federal protections, if there are any, at each site. So that's an example of the camp profile, and then the family profiles that I was referring to earlier. So each family that I had an opportunity to meet, I've been building out a family page like what you're seeing here. So this was a portrait that I made of the Idano family at the Rohwer site a few months ago, actually, this summer. And as the reader scrolls down the site here, they'll encounter maybe quotes from an interview that I was able to conduct with each individual. So this is Kazuo. He is a survivor of the camp. And as I was mentioning before, I have been asking survivors to write a letter to their child self. So Kaz is here writing a letter to dear young Kaz. And when you scroll down here, you can actually listen to each person reading out their letter. And a little blurb based on each person about their background. In Kaz's case, life leading up to his incarceration, life after incarceration. He had a particularly harrowing story about his father who was sent to Santa Fe. And he was separated from the rest of his family for the next 2 years. And Kazuo remembers that his father looked beaten down after their long-awaited reunion, and he speaks about how family dynamics were irreversibly changed after incarceration. But yeah, each person, so there'll be a little text describing each person, followed by the final accountability roster, indicating, you know, their names, where they were from, and where they ended up after the incarceration. And in Kaz's case, we were lucky that we also have a photo of Kaz while he was incarcerated. So this is Kaz is over here on the right here, posing next to his younger brother that you're seeing in the center. And they're standing in front of their barrack in Rohwer. This was taken in 1942. And as you scroll down the page, so you start to kind of get a glimpse of each generation. So this is Karen, you're meeting Kaz's daughter. And again, same format. We have Karen reading out her letter here. You can listen to this portrait. And as you scroll down the page, have Karen's daughter, who we're about to meet here, Jacqueline. Same format, and it ends with us meeting Jacqueline's brother right here, Blake, who's writing to his grandfather. So yep, as we walk through the kind of examples of the camp profiles and the family profiles, yeah, I also wanted to kind of give a quick shout out. As you can see, this project has been a long time coming. It's had required a lot of research, but also collaboration from members of the Japanese American community. I wanted to give a quick shout out actually to Kimiko, who's working behind the scenes right now. She was actually the first person to respond to my cold call back when Campu it was a little more than a pipe dream and idea. And she graciously welcomed me into the JAMP community. So 2 years later, you know, I'm grateful to be able to join Tadaima, not as a curious bystander as I have for the past, in the beginning, but as a contributor and as a panelist. And I'm also grateful to be able to unveil this project for the first time in this community space. So yeah, over the past 2 years, I've attended 8 pilgrimages where I had the opportunity to meet 20 families and interview over 50 individuals to understand the multi-generational effects of wartime incarceration. And I'm excited to share with you that I've recently completed the photography portion of this project, and I'm currently developing the website. As you saw little glimpses of, it's scheduled to be officially launched early next year. So yeah, to stay updated on the progress of this project, yeah, please feel free to follow my work at harukasakaguchi.com. Thank you. And I'd love to hand it over to Sandy. So excited to hear more about your work.
That was incredible. That's a really amazing, ambitious project. Well, my project really started taking shape in 2019 as my mother lay dying. I was sitting next to her. She was going in and out of sleep. The doctors told me she only had a few days to live and she was very weak. So I was quite startled when she suddenly sat up and started firing these questions at me. Why did the US government force 120,000 Japanese Americans into mass incarceration camps, but not German Americans and not Italian Americans? Why didn't other Americans stand up for us? And why didn't we fight harder for our rights? She told me she thought it could happen again, and she was really worried about her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And she looked me in the eye and she said, "You must do something to protect these young children." She died a few days later, and you know, I was thinking about this was really the last conversation I had with her before she died, because she drifted back into sleep after that. So as I was cleaning up her room, I came across this metal box, and inside the box, I had never seen the box before. And inside the box, there were all these keepsakes from my father, who had died 15 years earlier. And many of them were from the camps. There was a photo of my grandfather's funeral, and I found out he had died a very, very painful death. He had gone repeatedly to, his funeral was in Amache. He had died when he was in Amache, which is a camp in eastern Colorado. And according to the government records, because the government keeps records of everything, he had showed up at the medical infirmary several times, complaining of excruciating pain. They told him it was hemorrhoids. But finally, he came so many times, they sent him to a specialist and found out he had rectal cancer, and he died a short time after that. There was a photo of that. There was a photo of a sermon that a non-Japanese American minister had given in 1947. And it started out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And in the sermon, the minister chastised his congregation for not standing up for Japanese Americans. But what really surprised me the most was I found my father's wallet in there, and in it, it turned out he had kept his meal pass and his work pass from Amache. So clearly, this camp experience had haunted my parents for their entire lives, and I had no idea, because they never talked about it. I felt really terrible because I found out after they died, and I decided I wanted to do something. So I decided to go to Amache, and I asked Catiana if she wanted to come with me because we had worked on photography projects together. And what really struck me was the landscape. I was so overwhelmed by the landscape of Amache and the feelings of loneliness and abandonment and isolation that I got when I was there. And I wandered around for several days, and I was just haunted by the place. These are the foundations of the barracks that remain. The foundations remain, but to me, they look like coffins rising out of the ground. And this is the foundation and area. This is the vicinity where my mother's family lived. This might actually be the barrack they lived in. I couldn't quite tell from the schematic, but it was around that area. I felt very, very close to my family when I was wandering around Amache. And Catiana also felt very moved by the spirits there. And we considered them like a sacred ground. And we decided that we wanted to go to all 10 of the camps, because we felt that all of these camps had their own spirits, and they should be remembered individually, and they should all be remembered. So we went to all the camps, and our experiences at all the camps were quite different, and we were moved by all of them. One of the decisions we made early on was not to have any people in the photos, because we wanted a really immersive experience. And we were hoping that not only Japanese Americans would be interested in this book, but people who weren't Japanese Americans. We wanted them to feel what it was like being an incarceree and being told that in just a few weeks you were going to be ripped out of your homes and you were going to be put in these barracks. And what would it feel like? What would it feel like, for people who consider it a restriction on their civil rights to wear masks? What would it feel like to be pulled out of your homes for nothing you have done and being placed there simply because of your race? This is Heart Mountain, and one of the things that we found, and Heart Mountain's in Wyoming, by the way, and one of the things that we found in in visiting these camps is we were able to answer some of my mother's questions, at least a little bit. And I was very moved to find out that there were people who fought really hard for their rights. And at Heart Mountain, they had an anti-draft movement there, and it was pretty vibrant. And 63 men went on trial for draft resistance. It was the largest mass trial in Wyoming history. And these men said, we will absolutely register for the draft, but first you need to let our families go. And we talked to Takashi Hoshizaki, who's I think 98 now. He was one of the people who was on trial, and he said we were so sure that a federal judge, once they heard what had happened to us, would say, "Well, that's completely unconstitutional." But of course, they lost the trial, and he had to go to a federal prison. This was a photo from, and I'm not going to go through all the camps, but this was a photo from Topaz. And Topaz had people, almost everybody at Topaz came from San Francisco. So they had a fairly large community of artists there. And one of the artists there was Chiharu Obata, who's a famous painter, and I love his paintings. And he decided to start an art school, which gave the incarcerees voice through art. And that was another way that they stood up for their rights, is they use art to express themselves. I tried to capture the landscape that inspired him. The family very, very graciously, the Obata family very graciously let me reprint my favorite painting in the book, and it's the moon over the desert. And so I tried to capture that. One of the hardest camps to get into, in fact, the hardest camp was Gila River. It's on an Indian reservation. The tribal council was absolutely opposed to having a incarceration camp put on their land, but they didn't have much say, and they were forced to accept it. And then when the government pulled out, they left the place in a mess, and broken cement and debris all over the place. It's blocked off. You can't go on it without permission of the tribal council. They were very gracious, and they let us go on there. It took a while to get on because of COVID, but and the reservation includes the Pima and Maricopa tribe. And I'll end with this photograph, which you just saw. But we saw this at Tule Lake, the jail within the jail. And we were really moved by it. And we decided that it was the perfect title for our book. In fact, originally it was on the cover of the book, Show Me the Way to Go to Home. And it could have been a misquote of a song that was popular back then. But we thought it really expressed what we heard from a lot of families, that people just wanted to go back to their homes. And people asked me, because we had to travel a lot, and we had to go to a lot of remote places. But for us, it was very moving and very spiritual, and sort of like a pilgrimage to each one of these places. But they asked us, what do you want to accomplish with this book? And I said, I'm going to just quickly tell you a story, and I think you'll maybe understand. When I was at Amachi, I was wandering around, and this couple came up to me, and they said, "Were you at this camp?" And I said, "No, but my parents were." And they started apologizing profusely. They were white, and they were tourists from Minnesota. They said they had been driving down the road. They had plans for the afternoon, but they didn't have any plans in the morning. They saw the sign for Hamachi, and they turned in, and they said they had no idea, none whatsoever, and they were shocked. and they said they were going to wander around some more and then go to their afternoon things. That evening, I met them. I ran into them at a restaurant. There's a very small town, so there aren't many restaurants. And they said that they were so moved that they had spent the entire day there, and they were going back the next day because they wanted their adult children to see it. And they said it was so horrifying that it was really important to them that their adult children see it. And then I realized this is a step-by-step thing. We take pictures, we make videos, we tell our family stories. All of you tell your family stories to your friends. We have forums like this. Heart Mountain has a great teachers program, and bit by bit, people learn how ridiculous this was. You had families ripped apart. You had, savings wiped out, homes wiped out, businesses, farms, and for no reason. Not a single incarceree was charged with espionage or convicted. The government spent millions of dollars, and this country was not one iota safer. And I hope if bit by bit more people learn this, then maybe it won't happen again. And maybe my mother's fears will have been unfounded. And maybe that's how we make our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren safer. So that's why I do it. And I think that's why we all do it. And I also would like to do a shout out for Kimiko, who, this Daima is so important, and the pilgrimages are so important. So it's an honor to be here with all of you, and you're all doing really important work. Thank you.
Amazing presentations, both of you, and just amazing projects, having real impact. I think anyone who gets a chance to see Sandy and Catiana's book, it's a book you need to have on your shelves. I put the link to the publisher site in the chat, and Haruka's project is just, it's just immense in its value. I think telling these stories and having them with those photographs, being on the sites, really excited for that launch. So with all that, I'd love to just have some questions come in. Just unmute and jump in there. If you want to send me one, I can, through the chat, I can convey the question, but I'd love for people to just jump in here with a comment or a question just to get the conversation going.
I have a question. It's just about the archives. It sounds like there's different archives for these for all these photos, and I'm just wondering, are any of them like national, federally funded archives, or are they all, sort of private projects?
Well, Haruka, when you shared on your site some of the, for example, the photo of how it was during the World War II, and then you're recapturing the photo as it is today. Where are you? How are you actually finding those photos?
Yep. So those photos are on the National Archives. And there's also smaller collections held by universities. I had the privilege of being able to, I would say most of the archival photos that I've collected of the camps themselves are on the National Archives catalog, which you can access online. But yeah, I think when building out the family profiles, I had the privilege of also asking the families if I could publish their personal photos from their personal archives. So if you remember the portrait of Kazuo and his brother in front of his barrack, that was a photo that was from his private archives.
The great thing about the government is they keep incredible records. And so the national, in fact, it's amazing some of the records I found an investigation into my father, but they keep everything. You'd think they'd want to get rid of some of the stuff, but the archival photos are pretty amazing, and they're also pretty easy to use because many of them are tagged, and you can just you don't have to go there in person. You can find them online.
Who knows if the museum in California that has arts and crafts created by people who were incarcerated and who is trying to build a database of the names of the individuals who are incarcerated and now their families. I'm sorry, I do not know where that museum is located, but it's specifically for the incarcerated Japanese.
The collection that I discovered some of our family photos, the Yoshikawa collection. I want Aiko, the daughter, to be able to. I don't want to steal her story, but one thing that she did share with me is because the captions are general, man with camera and woman, but they're tagged with names. And she did tell me when we had our conversation that that they would have gatherings. And they would have the photos at the tables, and they would just, the Japanese American community would come together and identify people, because, we know from our own photos and our own phones how many there are, and we lose track of the older ones. I recently had my mom go through all of her photos and just label them, so I knew who these people were in our family history. But that's how I think those tags ended up in the archive, just because the community got together and actually was just through, discussion and conversation, putting names to the people in these photos, which is so important. It's part of that, the pieces that we're losing because these people are passing on, the time is going. So it's so important to capture that now, or it will just be lost to time.
And I also wanted to know that Paul Kitagaki Jr. is one of gay photographers that I really look up to, and his work, and what I think a lot of what he has done is based off of family photos that he has found off the National Archives. And he has been doing, I think this is a decade-long project where he has found these photos and was able to trace the identities of the photos of the people photographed in these images, and he connected with them and made photos of them, contemporary photos of them. And his project is presented as a diptych, where you would see the archival portrait and what the person looks like today. So yeah, please check out his work if you do get a chance, Paul Kitagaki Jr.
My son found a lot of old photos from my parents, and we couldn't identify them. So he put them on Instagram, and the local newspaper did a story in Sonoma, California, and Sebastopol. And pretty soon he went from having like 40 followers to like hundreds and hundreds of followers. And they all started identifying people for him. And so he sort of crowdsources his identification.
Crowdsource. Yeah, I think that is like, it's amazing how that can actually, work. And now, the way we communicate, it's the way to do the sleuthing. Yeah, that's wonderful. Let's see, does anyone else want to jump in with a question? Because I do have a question that I wanted to ask, but I want to make room for the audience. Thank you guys again for coming. I see a lot of familiar names and faces, so I appreciate you guys showing up. Well, I will jump in with a question I had for both Haruka and Sandy, just because of the amazing photography work that you have both are bringing to your projects. But is there a photo that you recall that is maybe the very first photo that where the Japanese internment concentration camp experience kind of came onto your radar, whether that was a Ansel Adams photo in a book or a personal family photo? I just wonder if there's something that has been maybe a guidepost for you, or something you think back on that brought you into, basically being a part of continuing on the story.
Yeah, I first saw the very first visual that I saw was actually, I wonder if I even have it here. This book, Topaz Moon, of Bata's work. And after seeing that, I really wanted to know more about the camps. Then I came across Ansel Adams photos, which really annoyed me because it was these cheery, smiling people. And then, of course, I saw Dorothea Lange's photos, and I'm a big fan of hers anyway. And that really moved me.
And yeah, I think I had a similar kind of trajectory where the photo that we were looking at earlier, the Ansel Adams photo of Manzanar, that was my first exposure, and unfortunately, probably the most kind of meaningful encounter that I had with the story of Japanese American incarceration until I had this interaction with while working on the story about the Atlanta spa shootings in 2021. So it really goes to show that, like what you mentioned, Sandy, you know, I wasn't really, I don't think I definitely, all I saw were the mountains in the background. I didn't really start to see the barracks in the foreground. I didn't see the photo for what it was until I was introduced to this story through the greats. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to connect with this man, with this interviewee, but I consider the very short conversation that we had before he declined my interview to be such a blessing and such a turning point in my life.
Yeah, no, that thank you for sharing that. One of the things I just, I'm kind of starting to collect more books, but I distinctly remember picking up this book at a bookstore many years ago. It's an Ansel Adams collection of photographs. But it's just funny because, I was drawn to those photos. My own grandfather was a photographer. I think I was for a long time maybe paying a little bit more attention to the famous photographs as opposed to the photographs in my own family history. And now it's kind of reversing itself, where I really want to see the photos from my family, know those stories. And I'm glad that the really well-known photos are out there, of course. But just that is how I was sort of drawn to it, even though I think that's how a lot of people actually experience it, through the Ansel Adams photos. They see those because of his fame and that being a part of his work. Let's see. Well, the last question I have is, just as you are doing this work and you're meeting people, and we have people on the call, and we want people to have their own pilgrimage experiences. Do you have any advice for people who maybe haven't visited the sites yet? So to go to the site and think about their own documentation and how they might engage the story. Anything that you've learned that you wanted to share?
I enjoyed going. So I think there are two experiences. For instance, I was at Heart Mountain during a pilgrimage, and I was there just really with Catiana, and nobody else is around. And they're two very different experiences, and both of them are incredibly meaningful. It's being there with other people and sharing the experience is wonderful, and hearing their stories, especially since there were survivors there, and it was incredible. Being there when you're alone, it's very meditative. It's like being in a trance, and I think I felt more of the spirits, and I felt more of I was able to transport myself more into what it must have felt like. But I think you need both to have a complete experience.
Absolutely. I was nodding really hard over here, Sandy, because I had the opportunity to join both private and I guess the kind of annual, more official pilgrimages. And it's a very, very starkly different experience. But I think what the two experiences have in common is, at least from someone who had the opportunity to speak with and spend time with families, even if I don't have family ties to the camps, I saw this overall dynamic of, we start off with these camps being a site of trauma, and at the end of the pilgrimage, these sites are sites of healing and recovery. And there's a reversal, there's an arc that I see, and I have, while speaking with the families, many have kind of articulated, and I thought that was a very, that was what made the pilgrimage such a meaningful and powerful experience for at least the families that I had the opportunity to connect with.
My wife had Citizen, published in 1946, all drawings of life and survival in the camp. Possible because photography was not really allowed. And it's just in these simple line drawings, it reflected man's inhumanity to mankind. And I'm just so
That's
great.
wonderful.
I love Mina Okubo's book. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you are now using photography to bring these memories back to confront our civilization, saying, are we going to do this again and again and again? Not incarceration only, but war against people. And we're seeing it in Palestine today. What is this man sin against humanity? It's just unbelievable. Because of religions, because of ethnics, because of cultures. Jeff, thank you for bringing this evening together.
Robert, thank you so much for joining and for sharing that. And I think that's a good place for us to maybe, I think you did a very nice job of sort of the call to action to the way to think about this and what these photographs mean and the pilgrimage experience. So Haruka, Sandy, thank you so much for your projects and presentations. Thank you everybody for coming and just being here to take part in this conversation. And thanks to JAMP, of course, we thank them a lot, but they really do deserve it. They've done an amazing job. And thank you guys all. Really appreciate it. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you.